You're listening to East of the Rockies, the Michigan Student Softball Podcast on WCBN Sports.
Well, Mr. Burns had done it. The power plant had won it, with Roger Clemens clucking all the while. Mike Scioscia's tragic illness made us smile, while Wade Boggs lay unconscious on the barroom tile. We're talking softball, from Maine to San Diego, talking softball. Mattingly and Canseco, Ken Griffey's grotesquely swollen jaw, Steve Sachs and his running with the law. We're talking Homer, Ozzie and the Straw.
And just like that, the third episode of East of the Rockies is underway. My name is Kevin Klein. On the other side of the glass, Jeremy Parks, Morris Fabry, the two WCBN Tampa Travelers, have returned safely from their voyage in which they saw Michigan go 3-2 over this past tournament. 2 losses to the 2 ranked teams that they faced. Number 4 Florida in a 10-inning thriller, and also University of South Florida later that day. And guys, let's get right into it. For me, the offense was pretty solid in the 3 games outside of the 2 losses. Those 2 losses were really just very emotional losses. What did you guys see? You guys saw it in person.
Well, first of all, Kev, I'd like to give you points for alliteration. I think Tampa Travelers is an appropriate label, one that we didn't get to use throughout our broadcasts either, so I think you are really catching on with us. And, you know, the offense was definitely the major issue for this team over the weekend, and it wasn't just in the Florida game and the South Florida game, although obviously they underwhelmed to a degree, but also that Illinois State game. If not for Courtney Richardson's 3-run bomb, that's a 4-2 game that Michigan won over a team that I think that most people would have expected them to run rule. The Delaware Blue Hens, not a great softball program, certainly some experience there, but also a team that, you know, while they won 7-0, I think it's safe to say we could expect more out of them, expect a sort of run rule against those kinds of teams. This is a lineup that was expected to struggle early on, and I think that, you know, the way that it struggled was not in a way that we expected. There were productions out of unexpected parties, while players like Terra Blanco, Lindsey Montemurano, really stable linchpins of this team on the offensive end, got off to some cold weekends. And I think that's something that'll right itself down the road. But, you know, maybe not cause for alarm, but it is the reason that Michigan dropped a couple games they could have had.
Yeah, I think it saw a bit of up and down over the weekend. Started off, like Mo said, a good win against Delaware, but something that we hit on a bunch later in the weekend, especially that USF game, was Michigan at the plate with runners on base and especially runners in scoring position. Not sure of the overall weekend numbers. I know for sure in that USF game it was 2 for 15 with runners on base, 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position. So really, really not good clutch hitting for Michigan. Could have gone a lot better, but I think what we saw was a good opening day on Saturday. Some of that youth did show through at the plate in the Illinois State game. Something Mo and I commented on a bit was maybe a bit of jumpiness at the plate. A lot of hitters looking for early pitches, trying to make a bit too much happen too early. Saw a lot of early outs produced because of it. But then coming in on Saturday, Michigan's best game by far. I don't even care about the St. John's score. The best game that they played was against Florida. Not even at the plate. Just the heroic performance for Megan Betza was incredible. The fact that Michigan was able to hang with that pitching staff, with Barnhill, with Delaney Gurley, and the Florida Gators was the most impressive thing we saw all weekend. I expected to be a lot more upset when Michigan lost that game in the 10th inning, but at the end of it, Mo and I put our headsets down, and we really were just surprised, and you couldn't have asked for a better game there. So I think that was really a drainer, and then coming into the USF game, there was a quick burst early. Michigan got out 3 runs on the board quickly, and then really sleepwalked their way through the last 6 innings of the game, only putting up 1 more run. And, an uncharacteristic error from Lindsey Montemurano allows the winning 2 runs to score from the infield. But other than that, I think they came back on Sunday morning against St. John's, really showed more what this team's top out level, I think, is capable of in terms of offensive production. Saw a much better outing from Terra Blanco on Sunday morning. I think that was, in retrospect, I was leery about that when I saw her come out to the circle. When the Johnnies came out to play, but props to Coach Carol Hutchins for letting Terra Blanco go out there and put a little bit more confidence in her arm after really a tough game to close out Saturday night against USF.
Well, let's focus on that Saturday when the Wolverines did drop those 2 games. You think about the amount of innings they played. It was 17, and where did they hit that wall? It was about inning 14, where you would expect to play just 2 games. So, but I think you guys are absolutely right in terms of the youth stepping up. But one player that we were a little weary about coming in was Kelly Christner, and she had a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, and also after a nightmarish start to the tournament, the first day, the games against Delaware and Illinois State, she looked really cold at the plate, and it seemed like all the games she had talked in media day and the weeks leading up to the season about really relaxing, having fun out there. The expectations that she would return to her sophomore year form seemed to be, just thrown by the wayside. But then against Florida and South Florida, the 2 best teams that Michigan faced all weekend, the biggest competition, she came to play. She got 2 hits against Florida, one of the best rotations in the country, also laid down a sacrifice bunt effectively in the later innings. A couple of hits against South Florida. Really impressive stuff from Kelly Christner. If she continues like that and the rest of the offense stays on pace around her, this Michigan team could not drop off much from last year.
Yeah, I think opening day saw a big boost from Courtney Richardson that really pulled up a lot of these Wolverines who had better days on Saturday and Sunday at the plate, but struggled in the early games against Delaware and against Illinois State. And like Mo said, Kelly Christner was one of the big ones on Saturday, coming out and really having a show of force at the plate. And then some of those hitters that are still just trying to figure it out after 5 games. Lindsey Montemurano was sat on Sunday after a rough day both at the plate and in the field on Saturday. Really a rough tournament overall for Monty. And Terra Blanco, who outside of the circle really did not have all that stellar of a weekend. And, I mean, a good pitching performance on Sunday, but on Saturday, I mean, against USF, not a great outing, given still adjusting to that increased role in the circle, but at the plate, not fantastic either. I believe just 2 hits.
And I'll throw it to the both of you. Terra Blanco, a bit of an underwhelming weekend, hit 3 for 15, walked 4 times. Obviously, she still incites fear in opposing coaches and opposing pitchers. And I think that with the lineup the way it is right now, they're a little more willing to pitch around her without, a Kelsey Susala hitting behind her in the order, without as much protection and as much, proven talent in the lineup. I mean, do you guys think there's any reason to lose confidence in her at the plate after one weekend?
I think it's going to take time for her to adjust to being that girl in the lineup because, Mo, I think you hit it on the head. Last year, when there were so many weapons, a pitcher couldn't focus on everybody. This year, they can pretty much focus, maybe, this is more so just early on Christner and Terra.
Yeah, I think it'd be ludicrous to say that confidence would be lost in her after one bad weekend, but it's definitely something that looking forward to Raleigh opening up tonight's game at 5 o'clock. You really want to look forward to how she's going to do at the plate, something that you want to fix before it starts to become a nagging thing all season long. You start to get into that mindset that maybe things aren't going to go your way this year at the plate, and it can really bite at you early, but obviously, I don't think one weekend is indicative of a fantastic career so far for Terra Blanco.
Yeah, I posed the question, but I would have to agree with you guys. I think that Terra's going to bounce back as soon as this weekend. While she did go 3 for 15, even Sierra Romero had 3 for 15 stretches in her career. Probably,
0 for 15 stretches at some
probably. But at the same time, she was hitting the ball hard. She had a good eye at the plate, drew 4 walks to only 2 strikeouts. Monty is a player that I think there's a little more cause for concern about just because this has been a pattern over the course of the past few years. She's really been a second-half player. Once she gets back to the home confines of Alumni Field, she seems to really turn it on, really be a playmaker and a producer, one of the best hitters on the team in Big Ten play. But for whatever reason, she gets off to a slow start. I thought it was kind of a fluke after 1 year, not a big problem, not something to pay much attention to after it happened again last year. But now that it happened, 0 for 11 in the first series, maybe there's something to it.
That's a good point, I think, for, even a lot of the young players. Something that we could not understand as broadcasters is that having to practice, having to balance your school during the week, and then in these early season tournaments for a team like Michigan, the amount of travel and the amount of miles that they log, I mean, you already look at it. They've already gone down to Florida last weekend. Mo and I were dead tired on Sunday when we got back. And
we were just standing broadcasting.
And we didn't do anything. And then you come back on Monday, and then you've got a full week of practice, and then you're out again on Thursday to go down to North Carolina. That's another flight. Get back again on Sunday. And you just keep doing that pattern for a couple weeks in a row, a month in a row, full of weekends, just going across the country. And that can really drain on a player. So I can see how some of these Wolverines like Lindsey Montemurano and maybe some of these younger players in the lineup are going to have to learn how to adjust to that. And Monty obviously has gone through it for a few seasons now, but that doesn't make it any easier on a player in terms of trying to balance everything in your schoolwork, because they are still student athletes and they still have to meet all these expectations on the field as well. And it can be a hell of a lot to juggle.
Yeah, I think this is something that could probably affect each player differently. And it's only one weekend, one little blip on the radar, and I think that, the course will correct itself eventually for it. It's just a question of how long it takes.
Yeah, our big tagline this weekend was sample sizes. Sample sizes. A lot of sample sizes for everybody this weekend. It'll be the same again this weekend in Raleigh against North Carolina State and Notre Dame.
Well, before we move on to this weekend's games, you mentioned Montemurano 0 for 11. Her backup or replacement, Taylor Swearengin, 0 for 7. So where does the team, or where does Carol Hutchins go from here? Both third basemen, struggling. So what is the right answer here?
Well, I think the right answer for now would be to stick with them. Let them battle it out. Swearengin had some good swings and some good at bats over the course of the weekend. Kind of struggled in, I think, the St. John's game when the rest of the offense was really clicking. So that was a bit of a cause for concern, a little bit strikeout prone. But those two will battle. They're good defensive players. You're not sacrificing anything on that end. And Maddie Uden is probably going to be playing shortstop next year for this team. But I think with playing shortstop also comes the skills to be able to play a third base spot. So if both Swearengin and Montemurano don't have it going, I think, we can reasonably expect that Uden will be able to play third base in a pinch. Beyond that, the corner spot is pretty tough to play. But I think that between those three, something will be worked out, and it'll be at least satisfactory for the team.
Yeah, I see it a bit around this team. You look at Terra Blanco, who had a rough weekend, go right back to her after a hard game on Saturday, put her right back in the circle on Sunday, and instill some confidence. And you see it on the hardwood, too, with Michigan at this point. Zach Irvin going cold forever. And then,
this is not a basketball podcast.
I know.
You hate basketball, JP.
You know what? Basketball's grown on me, Mo. I hate the NBA, but college, that's all right. But softball is the theme. I would say the odds that we see Uden, not great. I think you stick with Swearengin and Montemurano until the wheels damn near fall off here, because at least with Montemurano, what she's capable of consistently at the plate. And like Mo said, a lot of the time it's clicked in the second half. It's taken some time to get adjusted. And then Swearengin, we saw home run distance on a few of her foul balls that were not too far off on the weekend. So she had a good lick on a few pitches, but just couldn't straighten it out. And that was a good sign to see, too. One thing to keep in mind, that was not a very hitter-friendly ballpark compared to Alumni Field. There were high walls on the corners in left and right that they had to get over. Courtney Richardson climbed it. I believe it was a bit shorter, but a bit higher of a climb in the corners, and then deep it was about I believe 10 feet deeper.
Yeah, it was 230 to dead center, 190 down the line.
Yeah, so a little bit harder for the Wolverines to put a lick on that ball, and a little bit more space for some of those outfielders to make plays all weekend.
Yeah, and I think the key is sample size. We're talking about 18 combined at-bats from the third base position, 5 games in which Michigan did win 3 of them, and they were in the other 2. It wasn't like they were blown out and looked dead out of the water. So I think time will tell, and with 4 more games this weekend for the team to mesh together and that chemistry to be developed, it will be another opportunity for the offense to get clicking. We move on to this weekend's games, but before, actually, let's talk about some quick trends, because obviously you saw five games this weekend, guys. What are some trends that you really were encouraged by? The one that comes to my mind right off the bat is Megan Betts.
Yeah, she was superb. She was absolutely phenomenal. Got off to slow starts in the first inning, let a lot of leadoff runners on against the Florida Gators. But, while some pitchers fall apart under pressure, fall apart when it comes to damage control, she was absolutely lights out. 17 innings pitched over the course of the weekend, 27 strikeouts, 2 runs, only one of them earned, a complete game shutout against the Delaware Blue Hens. She was dominant, Kevin. Nobody got any good contact off of her that I can remember all weekend. Even the bloop hit that won the game for Florida in the 10th was something in on the hands, a little jam shot up against a drawn-in infield kind of in no man's land. I don't know what to say about her beyond she might be the best pitcher in the game at this point. Might have been the best pitcher in the circle in that game where Kelly Barnhill and Delaney Gourley also threw.
I'd have to agree. I think one other thing that I really saw that was encouraging was just the fact that the team didn't lay down after a hard day on Saturday. It was encouraging to see that the team woke up on Sunday morning and came out to play with force against St. John's. Didn't take it too hard, and it surprisingly from Carol Hutchins, not super angry sounding, at least in her post-game interviews about how Saturday went, realized that it's a team that's still got room to grow and was still proud of the effort. So I think overall it was a good thing to see that the Wolverines were still in it at the end of the weekend and they didn't let the elements get to them. That's a really important thing going forward, and especially towards the deeper parts of a season, to have that wherewithal to continue to fight when things aren't going your way.
I got another trend for you guys. How about the super sophomores for this team? We got Courtney Richardson, who was the surprise player of the weekend, but also Natalie Peters shining both on defense and at the top of the lineup, where I think all of us really questioned whether she really deserved the spot up there, but she hit .333 on the weekend. Alex Subcheck throwing runners out, being a little more defensively solid behind the plate and showcasing, I think, the bat that we all expected her to have at the plate. Faith Canfield hit .313 on the weekend. Nothing special at second base, at least not yet, but very solid player filling in for Sierra Romero. And even Katie Alexander, in the one game that she caught, showed a really solid glove behind home plate and went 1 for 2, even though that hit was about a 5-foot dribbler.
Hey, it doesn't matter how far it goes. A hit's a hit. But it is promising to see girls that maybe 2 weeks ago a Michigan softball fan wouldn't know who Courtney Richardson was, or wouldn't know who Alex Subject was, or who the starting catcher would be. But I think that's a big trend, that they're not relying on the household names.
Yeah, Subject too. That's a good catch there, Kevin. We interviewed a couple of the players this week, and you can look out for those in maybe next week's podcast. But one thing that I learned was that I'd been pronouncing her name Subcheck all weekend, like Subcheck, the thing you cash at a bank, but it's more like Subject, like subject without the T at the end.
Your interviews have been very enlightening these past couple weeks.
Yeah,
with the team.
we learned a lot about what we got wrong over the weekend, meeting with Hutch and the SID Leah on Wednesday.
We're making it better. We're making the broadcasts ever improved.
You know what? We should just keep a running tally. Hey, you know what? The best thing that we can do is admit our mistakes and not make them again.
You know what wasn't a mistake? You know what made it to the weekend?
What?
Danger softballs. Oh,
there you go.
Oh, man, no.
And my new favorite, putting ribs in the back pocket.
As opposed,
couple of bones.
to RBI.
Couple of bones right there.
Okay, all right.
I asked him for an explanation on here. I think you should offer one on the podcast as well.
So the whole thing was down in Tampa. I had a hankering to go to Chili's. Since the minute we got there was Chili's right across the street from the hotel. Shouts to the Clarion Inn on East Fowler Boulevard. Mo and I didn't get to play in the pirate ship in the pool, but, that's just,
next trip.
It comes with the territory of hardworking broadcasters. And so I was thinking about those sweet Chili's baby back ribs, and I really wanted.
We can cut that.
Yeah, no.
Oh man, there's
no, that's staying.
Between last week's introductions over those god awful songs, well, great songs depending on what.
Great songs, terrible
get
intros.
Out of here, Kev.
But
get
yeah,
back to the ribs.
So I really wanted some Chili's baby back ribs. So every time I saw RBIs, obviously you can say ribbies, and that's like a common thing for baseball terminology, softball terminology in terms of an RBI. But yeah, I just started saying putting ribs in the back pocket, because I was thinking about having some finger licking good barbecue ribs and throwing them in my back pocket at the Chili's, and that's exactly what Mo and I did.
It made just as much sense on the broadcast.
I'm very confused.
You don't want to know what the thought processes that go on in my head most of the time. It's so harebrained you wouldn't understand it. It's the mind of a genius.
Now that I know the process, I still don't understand
Genius or a madman?
Well, now that we all are enlightened with that story, JP, that was fantastic.
2-for-1 drinks on like literally everything at Chili's. Literally everything.
So are we making a Tampa trip just for the Chili's?
Well, I'm not going to lie. We got a tweet today from Stu that had the location information for the Raleigh Chili's, and we're going to pass that along to Leo and Dalton. Chili's is,
Oh, boy.
along with Chick-fil-A, a staple of WCBN road trips now.
Again, we're not sponsored, but we are open. Chili's, if you're listening to this podcast, we would love to strike a deal. Our station number is 734-763-3500. You can reach us via email. We're open.
We have a new email for the station if you're interested in submitting questions, comments, or concerns. It's
or sponsorship offers.
Yep. The email is eotrpod, P-O-D, at gmail.com. eotrpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, it'd be a cool thing to get some listener questions, listener topics thrown into the next pod, too.
JP has such a soothing voice.
Imagine the opening. You're listening to East of the Rockies, sponsored by Chili's. Chili's.
2-for-1 drinks at the Tampa location.
I'll tell you what. Mo tried to order a Bud, and she goes, well, we got Bud Light 2-for-1. They bring it out in a steaming hot mug. And we're just like, what? What is this?
I am not one to turn down 2-for-1 Bud Lights.
Bud Light in a hot mug turns it into a Natty Light kind of taste. It takes away any of the upgrade over a Natty.
So I think that's another good trend that we saw is the 2-for-1 drinks, but that leads into my next point, bad trends we saw with the steaming hot mugs.
Yeah.
Getting back to softball, the big one for me, the not,
Discouraging.
See, this is a linguistics podcast too. The discouraging trend for me was that Michigan couldn't knock anybody home and the lack of power that we saw.
Yeah, and I think we hit on that a little bit already. It was just the lack of timely hitting really doomed the Wolverines, especially in that USF game. Could have had, should have had, in all reality, a win in that nightcapper on Saturday. But I think that's something that moving forward, Michigan will just look to improve upon. It takes time. It takes a little bit of experience at the plate. And like I said, something that Mo and I saw quite a bit this past weekend was a lot of early tempting offers at the plate being taken up on and not necessarily the best pitches to hit, whereas if they would have sat back in some counts, waited to swing until they saw the first strike, might have had a little bit of a better offering to look at. But again, you can only look at that in retrospect and armchair quarterback it.
Yeah, I would tend to disagree with that. I didn't have a problem with any, first pitch swings from the Wolverines because I
Not
think
necessarily first, but even second, third.
I didn't have a problem with it because, the Wolverines were facing a couple of rotations, especially that Florida one that really attacked the strike zone against them without fear. And it is a concern that you can't punish that kind of brazen approach from an opposing rotation with a lot of power. You expect more home runs out of 5 games than one out of a sophomore left fielder in Courtney Richardson. And I think we'll see a bit of a course correction this coming weekend. But yeah, that's definitely a cause for concern. Our over-unders on the home run leaders for this team are all shot to high heck.
I'm going to need Terra to hit at least 6 home runs this weekend if I want to keep back,
Every
get back
single
on track.
pitch she gets a hold of is gone.
Hey, it's not that far outside the realm of possibility. But yeah, I didn't have as much of a problem with the approach at the plate for the Wolverines. I think it's just a matter of, it's an early season type of deal. And that South Florida game was played under extenuating circumstances. If it's something that continues over the course of this weekend and, then going out to Cali, yeah, maybe cause for concern.
All right, so in one word, describe the trip, the tournament for Michigan. I know I put you on the spot.
That's a tough one.
I'm going to say encouraging because, you know what, 3-2, at the end of the day, both games were winnable, and it very easily could have been 5-0 against or with 2 wins against top 25.
I'll go tumultuous because that was, well, first of all, it's a good word. I like expanding the vocabulary and all that, but it was an up and down weekend. A lot of fun throughout, but a couple more breaks go their way. They win. They go 5-0 with a win over Florida. Things go against them. Maybe they drop one against Illinois State, and it's a really disappointing weekend.
I'd say youthful. I think you saw some of the young shine through in this team, and the fact that Team 40 is still, early on in its campaign, but we've hit on it several times now, just the fact that moving forward it'll be just room for improvement.
So 4 games this weekend, as I mentioned. ACC Big Ten Challenge. It's Notre Dame, NC State, Minnesota, and Michigan are the 4 regional participants out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Michigan draws North Carolina State twice, Notre Dame twice. We've looked a little bit at the Wolfpack and the Fighting Irish. Is there any doubt in your guys' mind that Michigan doesn't go 4-0?
No, Notre Dame is not as good a team as Michigan saw last year, and in looking at North Carolina State, a bit of a middling team in the ACC. I don't think there's too much cause for concern for the Wolverines this weekend. But again, I was also the one on the high horse last week before Tampa that picked 5-0, and when Michigan went deep into that one, I think it was the 8th inning when Michigan had their best chance to score. They had Terra get walked and then Aiden Falk at the plate, and all she needed was a fly. I was so ready to never let Ewan Morris forget it, and then was so disappointed when the inning ended. But
That's why you never want to set high expectations.
Well,
that's why I'm bullish as ever this week. Not only is it 4-0, but it's 4 run rule victories for the Wolverines.
Get out of here, JP.
You know what? I think another lesson you should take, JP, is you never go against Morris or Kevin Morris, the two. I think the two smarts.
I don't know what you're
from
really
the
trying to. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to.
I'm
link
just
you to
saying.
with
I think
here.
Morris and I are a little smarter than you.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty clear before he said that, but we are talking to JP here, so we do have to state it in no uncertain terms. Well,
see, and you just spent the last 5 minutes explaining how complex your mind was.
Well, we'll
talk.
we'll talk about this in later podcasts, maybe off air. I think Michigan should go 4-0 this weekend. Rachel Naslund is a solid returning pitcher for the Fighting Irish, but they did struggle in their opening weekend tournament, dropping a game against an unconvincing, I think, Long Beach State squad. They were playing, out in Long Beach, but at the same time, a Notre Dame squad, they've got some pesky players. Carly and Allie Wester, very speedy and both well over 400 last year. But yeah, I think as long as Michigan gets enough out of either Terra Blanco or Megan Betza against the Fighting Irish, I think they'll win every game Betza starts. And, unless Blanco totally falls apart, I think they'll be able to do enough on offense to beat Notre Dame.
Now, would you say that Betza starts? I would assume she starts 2 games, right?
Yeah.
So is she going to start both against Notre Dame because that's the tougher competitor, one against each team?
Yeah, I think it's going to come into question how much faith this staff has in Leah Crockett to carry some weight because, once a pitcher gets started, this Michigan coaching staff is totally content to let them go the whole game. You saw last weekend 4 complete games out of the 5 games started by anyone. And Crockett she came in against St. John's with a huge lead, had some good stuff, but also some inconsistency with the drop ball or with the changeup, whatever she was throwing. It just kind of floated in there. And I still think she's kind of in project mode. So I think we will see Betza maybe against NC State both games just because that's the first and third game and, maybe save her in reserve to come in relief on Sunday or something like that.
I don't know why we're writing Terra Blanco off so quickly.
I'm not writing her off at all. She's just not at the level of Megan Betza.
Well, how many pitchers in the country are, though?
You can count them on one hand.
That's the point. I mean, Terra Blanco had a really successful tournament. In my opinion, ERA under 3 in 16 innings. The walks were a little bit of a concern, but I thought she pitched fine. I thought the team ran out of gas against USF, if anything.
Yeah, she was all right, and the defense did kind of let her down in that USF game. She gave up 3 home runs, the power, bit of a concern, but yeah, she was definitely, I think she lived up to expectations and maybe even exceeded them heading into the weekend. There is some really vehement gesticulations between the other 2 guys going on off camera or off mic.
I'm having a good time, JP.
Care to elaborate?
JP, what are your thoughts about these upcoming 4 games?
Well, my intelligence would keep me from venturing a guess for fear of sounding like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'll let you 2 wrap this one up with Kev and his ivory tower over on the other side of the glass.
Hey, this
is
the first time I've ever been on this side of the glass, and I got to tell you, the views are great. Fantastic views.
Yeah, JP showered. He looks good.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all we're going to say about
JP,
that.
you just no elaboration. No.
There should
thoughts.
be an extended and full apology on the behalf of Morris and Kevin in slight of my intellect
We'll give it to you off the pod.
and my pride.
Good enough.
No, because then nobody knows it happened.
We'll tweet it out. We'll do something. We'll get it out on
We'll
social
make an
media.
entire apology podcast for you, JP. How's that?
I'd like a press release.
All right, you can host the next pod and do with us what you will, but Kevin's in charge right now.
All I want is some of JP's thoughts for this weekend.
I already gave you some of my. I told you how bullish I am on this weekend, and you might laugh at that and call it hyperbole, but I'm really right there with this Michigan team. I think coming out of last weekend, they are not happy with the way that they played. They're going to come out angry. I think you see Megan Betza for at least 2 games. Might even come in and play a third. Looking at how many pitches she threw last weekend, she's obviously able to take on a fuller load this year than she did last year, and did a darn good job with it. So I would not be surprised if the Wolverines did run rule all 4 of these games, but I expect nothing less than 4 wins this weekend from this Michigan team.
Really, the only real question is how many danger softballs we're giving Notre Dame over this weekend. I think NC State is probably around a 2 or a 3. Not much to deal with, but JP, it sounds like you have Notre Dame at maybe 4 to 4.5 danger softballs. Not much cause for alarm.
No, I'm trying to remember what Notre Dame's football record was this year. Keep in
4-8.
For the fans, I was born and raised a Notre Dame fan, and I've come so far. I've come so far from that I didn't even pay attention to their final.
Maybe a 4.8 danger
I would say
softballs.
It would have sounded better if I hadn't, brought up the fact that I was thinking about it. But yeah, I'm looking at a 4.8 danger softballs for Notre Dame, and NC State, a team that in every game that I watch them in, no matter the sport, they always seem close to pulling off an upset and can never do it.
Yeah,
Thank you for failing me in the college football season against Clemson, missing a 23-yard field goal and letting Clemson go to the national championship. But
yeah, NC State also lost a 3.9 rated danger softball team, the Spartans, in their opening weekend tournament. So
yeah,
I really see, this is like a encoded message. I really like this. I like this.
Yeah, see, there's I don't know, maybe a little bit of intellect behind some of these jokes, Kev.
You know what? 2 things that have made me smile. One is last weekend when Megan Betza came out there and threw absolute fire. I mean, she was in mid-season form at the beginning of the season. Very encouraging. The second thing that made me smile is that Danger Softballs got back into episode 3 of East of the Rockies.
Now he's trying to inflate my ego because he feels bad. Danger Softballs is here to stay, whether you like it or not, and you can speak your opinion on it, Kev. Speak on it. But
I like it.
Danger Softballs is here.
So just to conclude here, 3-1, is that an unsuccessful weekend?
I wouldn't say unsuccessful. I would say disappointing.
I guess it just depends on how that 3-1 comes about. But yeah, I think this team's shooting for 4-0. I think 4-0 is realistic enough that a 3-1 weekend will be unsuccessful. You might still have some positive takeaways from it, but they're looking for a sweep.
Michigan only lost 7 games last year. If they drop 1 or 2 this tournament, they're already at 3 or 4. To be honest, I think we have to come to grips that this is definitely a different team and definitely a different makeup. What is one player who you're looking at this weekend have a big breakout performance?
Well, I think Terra Blanco would be too easy of an answer here. I think that Aiden Falk is one of the maybe underreported stories from that first weekend. She hit the ball very well, drove the ball well to the opposite field, didn't really get to turn on any pitches. I like Aiden Falk to hit a couple of dingers this weekend and really assert herself in that 5 spot in the lineup.
I would say over here with my low IQ, my breakout player pick from the season debut actually had the best opening weekend. So, Alex Subcheck, and I'd look for her to continue.
Subject now.
Yeah, I would. It's clear enough where maybe the check, it's close.
You better subject yourself before you wreck yourself.
Oh man, I hate that.
Boy.
But I would say I'd look for her again to have a great weekend behind the plate. Had 2 really great throwouts to second, caught 2 runners stealing in her first couple of games, and then had some fantastic plays against Florida. A couple of pass balls, got to that backstop, and a couple plays at the plate to be made to keep that game going as long as it did against the Gators. I thought Alex Subcheck all around at the plate, behind the plate, offensively, defensively, really had a good weekend, and I'd look for her to build on that again.
Now, did you obviously the one of the defensive plays you're talking about is that one where Betza threw it over her head.
Yes.
She recoups it from behind the net, or from the netting.
Put it right where she needed to into Megan Betts' glove to stop the slide. I believe it was Ocasio coming home on that play, and one of the speedier runners on that Florida Gators team with an opportunity to win it, or at least put the pressure on Michigan to come back in the bottom of the inning and score. Really was impressive. I thought that was probably the best play of the weekend, offensively or defensively, despite the fact that Michigan was unable to pull it out.
Now, did you see the replay? Did you see the video replay of it?
I heard she was safe, but, you can only go on what's called.
Mo and I had like a pretty good vantage point, I would say, but then again, we were right over top of home plate towards the third base side, just a hair, but again, close call. There were a lot of bang-bang plays this weekend, a lot of 50-50 calls, and Michigan, I would say, got probably 60-40 in favor of those 50-50 calls, but pretty good weekend overall.
Well, you can catch all of the Michigan softball action this weekend on our YouTube channel. Leo Blavin, Dalton Pataki down in Raleigh. They will be broadcasting live all 4 games. Once again, 2 games against North Carolina State, 2 against Notre Dame, as Michigan looks to go undefeated in this ACC Big Ten Challenge and have a good outlook for the Big Ten Conference as a whole. We'll wrap it up with these final thoughts. One thing we learned, one thing we want to know.
One thing I learned is that Mr. Parks across from me is pretty sensitive when it comes to barbs about his intellect. I thought it was all pretty good-natured, but sometimes things get taken too far.
Spiteful.
And we'll have to settle this one way or another. One thing I want to know, I think you might have to get back to me on that. I guess one thing I want to know is how the third base situation is going to work itself out. We'll keep it softball related because I think it could turn into a competition there, although current Vegas favorite for the spot will still be Lindsey Montemurano, obviously. She's got a good track record.
I learned that, what did I learn? I don't know. I learned that my co-stars maybe think less of me than I thought before.
That's false.
And that will be sorted out in the back alley behind the student activities building here once the recording wraps up. And one thing that I still want to know, I'd like to know where this team stands mentally top to bottom in terms of preparedness to go the distance for a full season. We saw Megan Betza take a heck of a lot of pitches, way more than she ever has last weekend over the course of those games that she threw in. And I would think top to bottom there are some players that are going to see a lot more action than they did last year, and we might not know very early on how they fare in that venture, but as we go down the line, it'll be interesting to see into the later months, into April and May, how this team holds up over the course of a beleaguering season.
One thing I learned is that I have a lot of respect for Jeremy Park and could never diss him in any sense.
Could never.
Will never.
Will never.
I'm saying in the
Never
future.
again.
I already have. I'm just saying in the future. The thing I learned is, listen, don't sleep on Carol Hutchins, because we were talking about it in episode 1. Oh, Natalie Peters at the top of the lineup. Yeah, Natalie Peters goes out there, 6 for 18, has an on-base percentage close to 400. So I'll take Hutch's word on that one. One thing I want to know is let's see if these sophomores, these young girls, can keep it up, can keep up this offensive production. And the key is get timely hits. You can rely on the veterans for a few hits here and there, but the timely ones are going to make the most impact on the games and the outcome of the games.
That should do it.
That should do it. So for episode 3 of East of the Rockies, just about finished up here. For Jeremy Parks and Morris Fabry, I'm Kevin Klein.
Reminder to email at eotrpod@gmail.com if you have any thoughts for next week's episode.
That's about it. We leave you with a good night and a go blue and some Jason Derulo. I don't know. I was kind of
Derulo.
I was just kind of feeling it.
Jason Derulo.